Fans of DC Comics have often asked whether the Joker would even exist if it wasn't for Batman. Does the Joker only live in Gotham because of Batman, and was Batman the one responsible for creating him? Well, we're going to take a look at these questions and see if we can find the answer. Now, for those who don't know, the origin story of the Joker was told in The Killing Joke, though it is worth noting that this is only one of the Joker possible origins, as it's told through the Joker's eyes, and he is of course a bit mental and unable to remember it accurately. Or as the Joker puts it, if he's going to have a past, he'd prefer for it to be multiple choice. But the short version is this. He had a pregnant wife and no money. He turned to crime to make money and broke into Ace Chemicals to steal stuff to turn into money. While there, he tripped on the cape of his costume, possibly because Batman was there, and he fell into a vat of acid, lost his mind, and became the Joker. So from that you could say that Batman is responsible, as he scared him and then he tripped and fell into the vat of acid that turns him into the Joker. But was that Batman's intention, or even his fault for that matter? Did he encourage Joker to become a criminal? Did he make it so that Joker was flat broke and had a pregnant wife? Or was he just in the same building that the Joker broke into at the same time? After all, Joker chose to break into Ace Chemicals. He could have backed out. In fact, the police had even told him earlier that day that his wife and child had died, so he didn't even need the money for them anymore. Sure, his partners would have been angry, but he could have still bailed on the whole thing. But instead, he decided to follow through on the robbery. He chose to, without any interference or encouragement from Batman. And even at the moment when Batman and Joker met, the police were already going in, and Batman stops them and goes in instead, as the police would just start shooting as soon as they saw the criminals. But say Batman hadn't been there, and the police had gone in, well, the Joker would still likely have gotten scared, and still trip and still fall into the vat of acid, and become the clown prince of crime. Batman is not actually the catalyst in this equation. Joker committing a crime and getting caught, and thus tripping, are what turned him into the Joker. Or at least, that's what turned him into the bleached skin version of the Joker. What actually turned him into the Joker was the abuse and terrible life that he had had before, combined with the fact that he'd been told that his wife and child had actually died earlier in the day. I mean, the man had a lot going wrong. Although I should say, although his wife and child did originally die, it was later retconned, and it was changed so that the police actually lied to the Joker in order to give the wife a chance to get away from him, as she basically said he was crazy and she was scared for her life. And she is still actually very much alive and in a kind of Batman witness protection. But Joker does believe they are dead, and this combined with the trauma from the vat of acid and what happened to him in his life before this are what made him into the Joker. And yes, he does later become fixated on Batman and their game of bat and mouse begins, but if it hadn't been Batman, then the Joker would have just fixated on someone or something else, because he is insane. Or at the very least severely mentally ill by normal standards. So whether Batman was there or not, Joker would still exist. As would the other Bat-Rogues Gallery villains. They weren't made by Batman, but rather by the terrible conditions and environment of Gotham City. The corruption of the government and law enforcement, the poverty of the citizens, and the cruelty in which they are treated is the reason they lost their sanity and became supervillains. It's not because of Batman. In fact, Batman was actually created by the same conditions that created them. The only difference is that Batman decided to make something good come from his trauma, whereas they all just lost their reason and became the villains. Admittedly, we know and love them, but still, they are the bad guys. Now, why they are different is anyone's guess, though there are lots of factors. After all, Bruce Wayne had wealth, resources, and most importantly, people who cared for him. And he was also very young when the trauma occurred, and kids are more resilient than adults. So these all helped, no doubt. But really, I think it's a simple case that he made the choice not to be a villain. He had to become Batman, his trauma demanded it, but he decided to be a hero instead of a villain. And he very easily could have turned into a villain. I mean, Batman would make a great villain. And that's pretty much what everyone else who had trauma decided in his city. They all decided to be part of the sickness, whereas Batman decided to be part of the cure. Now obviously they all have their reasons for this, and some are actually quite understandable and even quite justifiable, but still they have turned to crime rather than get the help they need. But the point is, they were created by the terrible conditions of the world, not by Batman. In fact, this is actually what the live-action Joker film was all about. Batman isn't even present in this version, and the Joker still gets made. And that's because the filmmakers recognise that Batman doesn't need to be there. It's actually the harshness and indifference with which Gotham City treats the Joker that causes him to become a villain. Combined with existing mental illness, yes, there's no doubting that, but the corrupt government denied him the medical treatment he needed. And if he had gotten the treatment he needed, and wanted incidentally, then he never would have ended up like this. The world made the Joker, not Batman. Just as the world makes all of us. We don't choose where we are born or who our parents are, nor how we are raised. But our lives are very much shaped by it. That's the real moral of the Joker's story. We are all one bad day away from turning crazy. And the reason for that is because we all live in a pretty crappy world that is torturing us. The world needs to make sure to keep the conditions safe, or else Jokers will happen more and more. I mean, we're actually seeing it all over the planet right now. Riots are becoming more and more frequent and violent, wars are breaking out, and this is all because the people with the power, the people in charge of the world, are not taking care of the people who don't have power. And of course this can only go so far and go on for so long before the people without power realise that they do have one power, they can just go and kill you and take your stuff. Or as they like to put it politely, they can eat the rich. Now, riots and coups have been going on for millennia, as the corrupt ones in charge always exploit their people too far eventually, until the people have had enough and decide to violently remove and replace the leaders. And it's the same environment that created the Joker. Had nothing to do with Batman at all. They were both made by a world that did not care, or at least did not care enough. It was a world that does not take care of the people that they consider beneath them. And these people adapted accordingly, and thus the supervillains of Gotham were born. If you need further proof, then simply look at a history book, and you'll see that villains and heroes are born in great times of tragedy. And just like Hitler and Churchill were made by the collapse of the world's economy, and the choices they then made in the aftermath, so too were Joker and Batman born from the chaos and exploitation of the people of Gotham City. So, I think the Joker would still exist without Batman. In fact, I think even more Jokers would actually exist without Batman. Because without Batman setting things right in Gotham City, well, the city would have only gotten worse. True, he hasn't really managed to turn the tide, he's only really managed to slow it down, and people are still drowning. But without him, things would definitely be worse. And it would be undoubtedly greater chaos and violence, and more Jokers. So it's the same story that's been going on since the dawn of time. As the people of the world are treated worse, they will in turn become something worse. And more criminals and violent people will emerge. Which is why in the live-action movie, Joker has become a kind of cult leader at the end. He manages to quickly and effortlessly amass a following. And this is because he is not the only one being exploited. And the others are looking for a way out too, and they're looking for a leader. And thus, he inspires them, and they act accordingly. And without Batman there to keep him in check, he could easily become the leader of a very, very violent army. So to summarise, it's not Batman who created the Joker. It's the people in power who have all the wealth, not caring for the people without power or wealth, and just exploiting the hell out of them. And that ended up creating the Joker. It was nothing more than poverty and despair. Which really is how all criminals are made in the first place. I mean, people think people turn to crime because they're violent or something. The truth is, almost 100% of the people who commit crime do it because they're poor. Do it because they want more money. I mean, that is really why crime exists in the first place. And again, although Joker does get a bit fixated on Batman, that's just because he's there. He kind of becomes the face of order in Joker's mind, which is the thing that Joker's trying to bring down. I mean, there are actually some really deep metaphors in the Batman-Joker dynamic. Seriously, you could talk about this for days. But I'm not going to. And of course, this is just my view of things, but I think it makes logical sense. I mean, if you beat a dog when it's a puppy, then it turns into a violent and dangerous adult dog. And the same thing happens if you mistreat a human being too much. Eventually, they end up breaking. Especially with the mentally ill, as their breaking point is normally lower than most people's. Whereas if you care for a puppy and you protect them, then they will grow up loyal and not violent, and a productive and useful member of society. Again, this is true of humans. It all depends on the way you treat them that decides what they will become. But if you do disagree with my view, then please let us know in the comments. along with your reasoning, and of course whether you do think that Batman is responsible for the Joker being born. And again, your reason why you think this. And I'd just like to quickly remind everyone that we have some merchandise available on our store, and to say thanks to all of you who have donated to the Needle Mouse Productions page on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe, share, like, and comment.